Welcome to this brand new educational premium series. As you know, the premium format just got a huge ban list, and it has essentially blown the format wide open. All of the most toxic or insane decks with loops and all of these weird things were all just nuked into the ground. And so now all premium enthusiasts are basically, what's the meta? I don't know. At the same time, Revival Selection just came out, so Premium has never been this easy to start playing. All the staples that used to be so expensive because they're that old were reprinted, and so some of our all-time favorite cards are just now more available than ever. So this means the format is in the healthiest place it has been in a year or more, and it's in the cheapest place it has ever been. Bring that together, and this is the time to start playing Premium. But what if you're new to Premium? Where do you even start? Well, I would tell you to check out two very interesting articles, link in the description. One of them is an intro to Premium, which cards to look out for, and the other is actually a depository with all the decks I can imagine. Basically, here's some ready lists to get into Premium and start playing. Whether you're new and just, need to copy a list somewhere, or you're new to a given clan and just want to try it out and you want a list to start from, boom, it's all there. But more on that later. This little series of videos essentially is gonna try to bridge that gap. So today we cover deck design, because that is a huge part of Premium. From the three formats, Premium is probably the most deck design based. We have a card pool of basically 10 years of Vanguard, and so there's a lot of little interactions you can do, there's a lot of options to build, and so creativity when it comes to building really shines in this format. In this video we will cover which online resources you can use to better improve your deck building, what the differences are between the formats when it comes to deck building, deck types, because some decks are just very different than others, and finally card roles. Which types of cards from which formats fulfill which roles. So first, which resources do you want to use to become a good deck builder? First of all, there's the two articles I just mentioned. It's the introduction to the premium format up on the Zero Damage Gaming website, and this essentially goes over what are some of the best strides for every clan. What are some other cards you really want to pick up? What are some G Guardians? How does all of that work? It's basically like, hey, I have my V deck or my D deck. What do I throw in here to start playing Premium? Will I have the best deck in the world by reading this one article? No, but you'll start getting into it a bit more easily. Again, you have 10 years of cards, and the article basically tries to condense it into here's the ones you want to focus on for now. Then the other page is the Deck Depository. I asked a bunch of amazing players, hey, shoot me lists. What's your favorite deck? What's your weird pet deck? Oh, you're a fan of this weird Maelstrom thing that also strides? Okay, that's interesting. Let's check it out. And so we just started listing it all. And as new cards come out, all of these lists will also constantly be updated. So whenever you're like, hey, I want to try out this deck, but I have no idea where to start, you can go to that link and there will be an updated deck list for you waiting. Now, will it be perfect? Not necessarily. It won't be the most optimal thing, take this now to a BCS, boom, win, Worlds Invite. It's not supposed to work that way. Again, Premium is very deck build dependent, and so the meta might shift, you might want to change a new tech and so forth, but it's the perfect jumping off point, let's say, to get into the format or a given deck. Right now, the list is actually huge already. Like, I'm pretty mind blown because we did this in 24 hours? Like, that's crazy. But it will grow. If you notice, hey, there's a certain deck missing, request it in the comments down below and we'll see if we can have it added. We just try to make this huge. Now, what's also interesting is these decks don't necessarily have to be top tier. There's a star system. 3 stars is competitive decks. And when I say competitive, I mean, I see this deck and I believe it could top 8 a major event. This is the type of deck that I expect to see at top tables, the type of deck I really need to test against to be sure that I can actually beat it. So when you see a top 8 at a given event, you'll probably see some of these 3-star decks in there, usually doing the best. But again, the format is wide open, so we're still kind of guessing like, oh, is this a 3-star or a 2-star? Speaking of 2-star, 2-star is where I put solid decks. These are the decks where we're like, yeah, it'll win locals and it could go X2 at a major event, maybe X3. It's still solid, you still want to test against it to be sure that you don't get caught off guard. It can do some scary things, but it's not necessarily something I would currently take to a major event. Now, I do have to say these star systems are estimates. You know, we look at a list and we go like, okay, given what we know of the format right now, where is this deck going? And then we go, oh, it's probably 2 stars. But it's very possible that as we keep on testing, some of these decks will go up. Finally, there's the 1-star decks. These are the decks we assumed are just casual. They're just fun, you know. You want to try out some weird archetype from 2014 and you slapped some Strides and G-Guardians in it. And you're like, you know what, I'm just gonna have fun. I really like these cards. I know they're not the greatest, but it's gonna be a good time. That's where those decks go. One of my favorite decks, for example, Revenger Abyss. Yeah, the Legion is still in there. Now, the reason for the star system is because if someone is new to Premium and then goes to these lists and checks out, let's say my little baby, the Revenger Abyss deck, and goes, oh, so this is a good list, copies it, buys all those cards, and then gets curb stomped at locals, that's not a great experience. So by adding the power levels, we ensure that people who buy a deck for the first time know what they're getting themselves into. If you're buying a 1-star deck, don't expect to go to the World Championship with that deck. Now, if you can, more power to you, I love it. But that's basically the idea behind the star system. So these 2 resources, the intro article and those pre-made deck lists, are basically where you're gonna start on your journey, in my opinion. Next, there's YouTube. YouTube is a great resource, be sure to use it. There's amazing channels, like mine, Different Fight, Vanguard Insider, Living Proof, TIE Fighter, WCC channel, World Class Card Fighters. Or is it Team WCC now? I forgot. Outer Orange, Nexus Score, there's a billion channels out there. You're a YouTuber covering Premium, shill for yourself in the comments down below and I will heart it. And I will check, so don't lie. I want to see premium content on your channel, otherwise no heart for you. So yeah, there's some YouTubers down there if you want to check them out as well covering this format. Finally, there's also Twitter. There's the hashtag VG Top Decks, where people post the decks with which they win at locals or maybe at major events in the future. And this way you can also check out lists. Now, VG Top Decks is also used for other formats, so be aware of that. But again, that's a solid resource. Finally, there's just other groups, whether it's Facebook groups, or maybe you have a text messaging app or Discord. Whatever group you can go to talk to Vanguard players, you will probably learn a thing or two. So those are the areas I would use. The website with the articles, YouTube for videos and more explanations and so forth, Twitter for topping lists, and then wherever else you can talk about Vanguard. Next, let's talk about the differences in formats, because formats are different, you know. There would be no point in having 3 formats if they were exactly the same. So first there's the Overdress format, the youngest one with the smallest card pool. Because it's the youngest one, it's meant to attract new players, and it has the least cards, it's obviously gonna be the simplest. Most of these decks, you know, you don't have as many options because you only have a few months worth of cards. So in this format, you expect very straightforward type of deck building, very straightforward types of combos, and overall it's just the easiest to get into. Then there's V. V has been around for a little longer, so it has more cards and thus more interactions. There's more moving little pieces. One card may lead to another, and then the next may lead to another, and so forth. You have imaginary gifts, you have orders, you have heal guardians, you have a variety of cool little interactions already. And so the barrier to entry is a little higher than D, but it's still not, you know, all that big. And then there's Premium. Premium is 10 years of cards. That's a lot. Not to worry, not all these cards are that good. But because it is an older format, you do have some things you need to consider. Decks are getting more and more into specific niches that they actually dominate. For example, let's say you were playing V a year ago, your deck could actually completely change every single set because every new card would completely change everything. You would replace your boss monster and suddenly your entire playstyle would change and all the new cards were better than the old ones. And so your clan would change from set to set. In Premium, that's not really the case. You have so many cards that are so good that your deck, once it really found its niche, the one thing it's great at, it's very possible that even as sets come out, your options grow, but the way your deck works stays similar. So for this reason, it's actually very interesting to master a given clan. If you have been playing Shadow Paladin for 3 years now, you've noticed Luard has constantly slightly changed, but a lot of things also stayed similar. This means that whenever a new card comes out, you can pick up like, hey, I remember doing this and this and this and this with Luard, and that will actually work very interestingly in that deck. Similarly, when something gets banned, for example, it's very easy for you to realize, oh, but we didn't have this card 2 years ago, but we can still do all of these other things. Oh, I can go back to that. And so it's very interesting how you can really go in depth into a clan in Premium and truly master it, because a lot of things stay the same and new pieces are added to the existing building blocks. So for me, that would be Grand Blue. I've played this clan for so long now, and whenever a new card comes out in D or in V, I'm like, oh, that works with that and that and that. And then all of these little light switches go on. So that's very interesting. I don't think anyone has that with every single clan out there. I'd like to think I have this with maybe 4 or 5. But once again, that's another exciting part about Premium. You can really clench your teeth into a given clan and go super in depth into the entire card pool. And new stuff may come out, but it won't completely change your clan usually. Another good example of that is Dark Irregular right now. You know, Gasti just got hit, and obviously if you're a DI main, you're now, oh, that kind of hurts. But then if you've been playing them for a while, you're like, oh, I can still do this and I can do this. Oh, do we start running this card now? Oh, what about this coming card? And you just instantly, all of those little networks come together and you just see so many exciting new pictures. Now, the final difference in this format is the creation of deck archetypes. Essentially, you can start slotting different decks into types that you generally already know from other card games, and that also go beyond the clans themselves. What are these archetypes? Well, again, if you've played other card games, you already know them. Aggro, combo, control. Now obviously it can go way deeper than that, but I'm trying to stay basic here. For the longest time, if you spoke about Vanguard theory to anyone, they were like, oh, Vanguard is just different flavors of B-Town. Because for the longest time that was the case. Because everything relied around units attacking, you would always get to a point where it's just, can I attack more than you? And that was the only question you asked. Or is my attack big? That was the only question once again. But as time went on and all of these new cards were added to the pool, complexity was added and thus that depth was also added. So Premium, in my opinion, is the only place where you really start getting very clear differences between these three types. Let's take, for example, Aggro. A really good example here is Anger Blader. Tashikaze. Before Heal Guardians come out, let's not complicate it, this is a pure aggro deck. Its goal is I'm gonna ride up on 3 and I'm just gonna bash your skull in. And if the game goes on long enough, I'm probably gonna lose because I just run out of steam. I need to put all of the cards from my hand onto the field, push them into the equip gauges, and I'm just gonna bash your skull in and please die. That is what the deck does. Even on grade 2, you already slap down your sweepers and you're like, okay, bash, bash, bash. This is an aggro deck. It's pure aggro. Are there like a few combos you can do once you're in your stride turn? Sure. But it's an aggro deck. And no one's even gonna say, oh, this is a control deck. No, it's an aggro deck. Now let's take a combo deck. A good example of a combo deck would be pre-ban Gasti. It does absolutely nothing turn 1. It does absolutely nothing turn 2. It does absolutely nothing turn 3. All it does is turtle and sit until it does its one big combo, just charge. I'm gonna do this and then this and then this and then this to eventually reach my 1 win condition, this attack pattern combo. I do that thing and I win. It's clearly a combo deck. Another really good example of this would be Luard after Premium Collection 2019. Morfessa is a very strong stride and it essentially says, once you're at Ritual 10, I'm gonna do some crazy stuff. 2 years ago, reaching Ritual 10 was actually pretty hard. At least on first stride. So you had to do some crazy combos. You could use Naois together with Cursed Eye Raven, and then you would do maybe find a Dayland, and you would draw into another Raven, into a Noise, and you basically started comboing off until you reach your Ritual 10 to then try and win with another attack combo, by the way. These decks are sometimes referred to as solitaire decks. Another example would be the Fenrir loop we just had before. You know, you played with yourself with Kroot and Witches and Geldra and Taro until you were ready. Everything has infinite power and then you do your one attack combo, boom. Everything was done. And before that point, you did fuck all. So these are very good examples of combo decks. Once again, all of them were playing solitaire. Now, you don't necessarily need to play solitaire in a combo deck. Maybe your combo just isn't that long, but they are very good stereotypes of what a combo deck is supposed to be. Finally, there's control. The goal of control is essentially, if the game can go on long enough, I'm gonna win. And so my only goal here is to control the pace of the game, to try and survive, and then essentially auto-win, because my win condition is so much more powerful, than anything this puny aggro deck can do, and maybe I can even disrupt your combo, so when we reach the end of the game, I win. That's a control deck. Some people think, oh, control means I can retire rearguards. That's not true. If you go to any other card game, destroying a monster, destroying a creature, destruction in general isn't necessarily control. If you go into, for example, Magic the Gathering, it's not because you put a Doomblade in your deck that you're a control deck. If you go, for example, in the color blue in Magic, almost nothing blue actually destroys things, but it's still the control color. So it's more so about controlling the flow of the game, ensuring that you stay in control and don't die, and then eventually you reach some state where you just auto-win. Whether that's a Jace the Mind Sculptor, Thassa's Oracle, Laboratory Maniac, Coming of the Second Sun, or, in terms of Vanguard, your opponent's hand withers away, or you geese them, or you do some crazy Ultima combo. Yeah, control decks can even have some kind of combo. That is actually what control is. You are a very reactive deck. And we may actually talk about proactive and reactive more in depth in this series, but just remember those words. Aggro decks tend to be proactive, control decks tend to be reactive. It's very possible that your aggro deck maybe does some combos, or your control deck maybe does some combos. And again, these will sometimes flow together a little bit, but Premium is really the place where you can see these three types start to move away from each other. I don't actually think V has any control decks. I don't think Overdress has any control decks. Not in, the truest form of the word at least. Not yet. I think it'll come eventually. But by being aware of these archetypes, you can also build decks better. For example, if you notice, hey, for some reason, the past 3 iterations of my clan's best deck were all combo, maybe your clan is really good at combo. And so maybe trying to turn your clan into an aggro deck is just always gonna fail. Now that doesn't mean you shouldn't experiment with this, but it's good to be aware of. A good example of this, once again, Dark Irregular. Ever since Premium was introduced, Dark Irregular has been a combo deck. So if you are now telling me, oh, actually, I'm gonna turn Dark Irregulars into an aggro deck, I mean, be my guest. But it's probably not going to work out all that well. Luckily, some clans can actually do a lot of these things. But again, just be aware of the types. Finally, let's talk about card rolls. Now, when I say card roll, I don't yet mean extender and all of this stuff like we see in Yu-Gi-Oh! If you've ever read Yu-Gi-Oh! Theory books like Patrick Hoban stuff. All really cool stuff, but that's not what I mean. What I mean more so is that the different cards from the different eras are designed very differently. And so the roles they fulfill in your decks will often be very different from each other. If you look at premium decks today, what do you usually see? Well, first of all, you'll see that there's a lot of V cards in them. The reason for this is that V had quite a bit of power creep. So the base stats of a lot of cards from V are just better. That's just the truth. You have usually more guard, you usually have cheaper or better skills, you usually have higher power for whatever reason. V cards generally are straight up just better. So it's very possible that if you see a certain card in G, and you're like, oh, I really want to run this, V might just have a better version. If one card in G gives 5,000 power, the V1 will probably give 15,000 power. Now then you ask yourself, why isn't everything just the same as V? The answer is, first of all, you have the different mechanics like Stride and G Guardian, but also because certain cards still fulfill entirely different roles and power becomes a bit less relevant there. You will notice that while base stats in G were lower than in V, G dared to go pretty far when it comes to interactions between rearguards. And so where in V, all of your multi-attack often came from your boss, in G they were like, oh, we're just gonna print this on your rearguard. Great example, Crayon Tiger in Great Nature. While Crayon Tiger is a 9,000 power rearguard with 5,000 shield, and it only gives 4,000 power to another rearguard, quite pathetic, it also restands that rearguard. And so while in V you will find cards with better power that draw you extra cards instantly for no cost, none of those cards will restand other cards. And so if you want a rearguard that combos with another rearguard and restands it, there's only one place you can go to get it. And that's in G. You're gonna have to use your Crayon Tiger. You're playing Shadow Paladin? Same story. Maka, Dagda, these attack extenders only exist in G. V Morfessa is a bit of an outlier there, but once again go to Grand Blue, Nightstorm, only exists in G. So you will find that while in terms of raw power, you will usually have better V cards, when it comes to little interactions between cards, it will often be G cards. And that's also where I want you to be thinking when first getting into deck building. Most of your cards will probably be from V, because they just have the best stats. But when you need a little interaction, it's possible you'll find it in your G card pool. So those are the different roles they're basically fulfilling there. Tying it back into starters, extenders, and so forth, usually your extenders are in the G card pool. Now finally you must ask, so what about Overdress? Where do these cards fit in? Well, so far, they don't fit in many places. Because once again, a lot of interaction comes from G, and they already dared to go very far there. So anything they've printed so far in OD just isn't as good when it comes to the interactions as G. And then in terms of raw power, OD also hasn't caught up to V yet. So most of your cards are understated in comparison to the V cards. However, there is one thing that you can get in Overdress, that you can't get in V or G that well yet. And that is utility. Certain cards in Overdress simply do entirely different things than you will ever find in either format. A good example of this is Additional Angel. Additional Angel puts herself in the damage zone and then gets a grade 3 out of damage, but that part is really not important. What's interesting is this card allows you to add damage to your damage zone and thus gives you access to Counterblast. And so you will notice a fair few premium decks actually run Additional Angel. Not because of her stats, not because of extension, but purely because no other card in history has done what she just did, except for Bobo. But Bobo only works like later into the game, so ignore him for now. So again, V might have stronger cards, G might have interactions, but neither of them have an Additional Angel. Another great example is the orders from Stoichia. Stoichia has a bunch of interesting orders because of Zorga and also Magnolia. And while again, V might have better stats, G might have a bunch of interactions, neither of them have orders with all of these little skills. And so as these will power creep, we will likely start seeing us playing more and more of these orders, because you simply can't get them anywhere else. Again, there's also a variety of other utility cards you can find in Overdress, but this is once again something to be mindful of. And as, of course, Overdress gently power creeps, as it probably will, more and more of these cards will also gain stats that might actually be better than V, or equal to V. So that's the general role where I'm currently putting Overdress at least. So G, my interactions, V, my raw stats, Overdress, my weird little utility cards. This was the first little introduction to deck design philosophy, I guess. I hope you found this interesting. Once again, be sure to check out the articles if you want to get into premium or you want to just copy some decks. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you soon. Ciao.